And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
I don't care!
What's next?
What's next?
What's next?
Don't you want to hear what's next?
What are you going to do next?
What's next for you?
What's next?
What's next?
Okay, so what's next?
I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of After the Gold. And this week we are going to be looking at the great, talented Mr. Ripley from 1999, Anthony Minghella's follow-up to the 1996 Best Picture winning The English Patient. But if you're new to the series, which many of you are, welcome. What I'm going to be doing here now for the next few weeks throughout the summer up until the next Oscars season is talk about movies that were made right after Best Picture winners, see how they got made, do a little bit of historical context, and then also give my own personal thoughts to see if they're worthy follow-ups, how they did at the Oscars, if that really matters, and kind of what its modern day reputation is today. And as always, I'd love to hear your comments down below. Let me know what you think about the movie. Have you seen it? Have you seen The English Patient? Do you think it's better than The English Patient? And what's your relationship maybe with Anthony Minghella? All that stuff I'd love to hear in the comments down below. But without further ado, let's jump into things, starting off in the first half of the video, which is that historical context, how it was made to be, what was it kind of appreciated like at the time, and then how is that kind of modern reputation. So, like I mentioned earlier, the movie we are covering today is 1999's The Talented Mr. Ripley, the follow-up to The English Patient, which was, I believe, was released in the kind of the fall, winter there of 96. It was a pretty easy Oscar year. It won the Golden Globe, it won the BAFTA, eventually won the Oscar. It won a total of 9 Oscars, so really swept the Oscars that year. And it was kind of a throwback movie, like the days of Lawrence of Arabia, where it was a 3-hour-long epic romance, felt important, and I think to tell this story, you also have to tell kind of the history of Miramax and Harvey Weinstein and how integral they were to making this movie, because it was kind of dropped a couple weeks before production, before Miramax came in and funded it, and it was kind of one of their big awards movies of the year. And in this time period, you can't talk about the history of the Oscars without talking about Miramax and movies like English Patient or Shakespeare in Love, in which they kind of told people was important, and then made those movies eventual Best Picture winners, even if they weren't necessarily actually important. And it's funny to take a look at the list of the 90s movies, especially the Best Picture winners, because you have a lot of slam dunk hits that I think everyone recognizes are classics, like Silence of the Lambs or Titanic, and then some weird ones, like The English Patient, like Shakespeare in Love, which maybe you have heard of, but I don't think have a strong modern day reputation. They're not of the kind of film canon levels as something like a Titanic. And in part that's due to some of the campaigning that was going on in the 90s to tell people that this was important. And when I think about that era, I kind of think of The English Patient. Even though I like The English Patient, I think The Talented Mr. Ripley is a better film. And I want to cover The Talented Mr. Ripley on this episode in part because of that. Because the last 2 episodes with If Beale Street Could Talk and Zero Dark 30, both movies I liked, but both movies I think that weren't as good as the movie that actually did win Best Picture. This case, I think it's the opposite though. It's a little bit more of a commercial movie, The Talented Mr. Ripley is, but I do think, and even its modern day reputation, is that it's the better movie than The English Patient, which is funny to see. We don't always see that happen, and maybe that will happen with a movie like, let's say, If Beale Street Could Talk or Zero Dark 30, the more it goes on. But now, 25 plus years removed from the release of this movie, at least when I was kind of learning about films, this was kind of the movie that was shown to me before The English Patient, that this was the one that was more likely to enter into the canon, even though The English Patient had won Best Picture and got all of those Oscars. But in terms of the production value of how this movie got made, it is similar to the past couple of weeks, in which it was kind of okay, let's do the same thing again. The last time it worked, so let's do it again. The English Patient was kind of a $40 million period piece based on a book with a lot of kind of young up-and-coming actors that weren't maybe household names just yet. That was The English Patient, was a huge success. They decided to do the same thing here with The Talented Mr. Ripley. Young stars, acclaimed novel, period piece. And actually for a similar budget, there wasn't too much of an increase. And I think it was a very hotly anticipated movie because the last movie won 9 Oscars and was kind of an old-fashioned, epic period piece. The question then becomes for Anthony Minghella, who was a newer filmmaker when he won The English Patient. He had made a couple of other movies, but was still in his kind of early 40s. The question was, what's next? What is he going to do next? What's his kind of next chapter? And while on paper everything sounds the same, period piece, based on an acclaimed novel, it's not 3 hours long. It's a little bit more commercial, I think, based on the novel as well than The English Patient. And it didn't do as well in terms of the Oscars, but I think did pretty solidly thinking back on things. It is a kind of classic Best Picture follow-up in that it doesn't get nominated for Best Picture, but gets nominated for 5 Oscars, doesn't win any. All did make a good amount of money, though not as much as The English Patient, but still solid for this type of a film. So it was kind of like we just redid The English Patient on paper and got less Oscars, but still a decent number of nominations and got $100 million. So probably at the time it was seen as a bit of a disappointment. Of course, you never were going to reach the heights of The English Patient at the time. But now looking back on it, I do think that The Talented Mr. Ripley still, as a film, is probably more well appreciated than The English Patient. Let me know in the comments down below if that's your opinion and you think that's the just general consensus. But the production history of this movie isn't that engaging. The reason why I wanted to do this episode was because of the movie, because I really enjoyed it and still enjoy it to this day. So transitioning now into the discussion of the film, I think that the piece of art that we have here is the reason for making this episode. And I really love this movie on kind of basic primal levels. On one part, it's just the cast, and the second part, it's the setting. I think it's just the prettiest movie ever made, probably, with 5 movie stars that are right about to break out at the perfect time in their careers, that are not only great movie stars, but also great actors. So speaking about that cast there, what is amazing, just as the movie as a kind of time capsule, is to see Jude Law, Cate Blanchett, Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, really all these young movie stars at a similar age group about to kind of take off. While they were filming this movie, Gwyneth Paltrow and Cate Blanchett got nominated for their first Oscar, Gwyneth Paltrow eventually going on to win that Oscar. And then Jude Law, Matt Damon, even Philip Seymour Hoffman, they were all in the year earlier, in 97, had their kind of breakout roles with Good Will Hunting and Jude Law and Gattaca and Philip Seymour Hoffman, who'd been in a couple of movies now, but I think really Boogie Nights helped put him on the map as a supporting actor, an exciting supporting actor. And then it's the fall of 99 when you have this kind of just perfect moment in time in which a year later, or even a year earlier, the cast would have been completely different. And I'm so glad that we did get this, because you have, like I said earlier, kind of movie star energy, but then also great actors. What I think is the secret trick about this movie is that it's an ensemble movie, yes, but it's not an ensemble movie in the same way, I don't know, MASH is an ensemble movie, or Parasite even is an ensemble movie. When I think about those movies, I think about multiple actors in one scene interacting together. Or something like The Big Chill. The best scenes of The Big Chill are all the actors together interacting in one scene. But this movie doesn't have that many of those scenes of all the actors interacting at once. It's always these kind of one-on-one individual silhouettes. But what's so amazing is that because you have great movie stars, you also have great actors that are able to bounce off and have chemistry with pretty much everyone in the cast. So there's great scenes with just Matt Damon, Philip Seymour Hoffman, or just Gwyneth Paltrow and Cate Blanchett. And it's kind of these small individual one-on-one scenes. And at the beginning of the movie, you think, with Jude Law's character, you spend a lot of time with him, and you think, man, I just want to spend as much time with Dickie Greenleaf. He's so exciting and interesting. And then later on in the movie, when we shift to different characters, and sometimes there's scenes with just Philip Seymour Hoffman, I remember the first time watching it, when I saw Philip Seymour Hoffman's character be introduced, I thought, oh, I don't want a new character. I just kind of like the dynamic we've got here with the arc of Core 3. But then, of course, Philip Seymour Hoffman comes in, and he's an incredible movie star, and he's got this great entrance, and you go, wow, okay, now I want to actually be interested in this guy. You're kind of okay with leaving Jude Law to the side for a second, because if you're going to bring someone in, you might as well bring in one of the best actors of all time, in the case of Philip Seymour Hoffman. And then they're all just movie stars in the sense that they look incredible and they're young and they caught them at this perfect age, which leads to the second point of why I like the movie so much, which is I think it is the prettiest movie ever made. When I think about this movie, I just think of this idea of effortless and this sense of perfection. When I think about movies nowadays, You still have really great movies and movies with really interesting themes, similar to this movie. But when I look at The Talented Miss Ripley, truthfully, I don't go, man, what an interesting psychological drama about jealousy. And like that stuff's all there and it makes you engaged enough to continue watching the movie. But there's also great movies about jealousy and psychological movies that are released now. The main difference of The Talented Miss Ripley, which is why I think it stands alone, is because it's how pretty everything looks. It's the on-set shooting. It's the budget level for this type of a story. It's the actors all at the perfect age. It's kind of, in many ways, the prime of the idea of Hollywood as an idea of, let's go to a location, let's spend a lot of money, let's shoot beautiful people and beautiful clothing and beautiful settings and make it look like this kind of escapism, fantasy kind of a movie, but in real life. That we don't always see in the modern day era, or is maybe harder to achieve. So when I talk about this movie and what really connected to me on this most recent rewatch wasn't the kind of interesting psychological stuff in the second half, which is, like I said, interesting and I enjoy. It really is that first half. It's that kind of primal, hard to explain, I'm just looking at the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. That's kind of just the most simple way of putting it. Just watch Jude Law drive through the Italian Alps with a linen button-up shirt that's just hanging over him with a convertible top down. You look at it and you go, I want to be that person. I have that kind of a fantasy. It makes you want to be kind of rich and young and without a carefree in the world. It's the sense of idealism, which works so well to the themes eventually, though, is too, so that you have the great kind of peak in the idealism in the beginning, so that in the second half, when everything starts to kind of crumble and the cracks start to seep in, you know how kind of insidious it is, because there was something that was kind of pure and terrific in that sense. So it is the styling of I think of the cardigan that Gwyneth Paltrow wears on the vine-covered terrace. It is just the great actors and how perfect they look. No acne, not a hair out of place. And then the setting as well. As much as I like the whole movie, when I think about this movie and I think back to it, it really is that kind of first half with the core three, we'll call them, with Jude Law, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Matt Damon, and them interacting and just how they look. Sometimes, when you see hundreds of movies a year like I do, like many of you probably do as well, you take certain small things from certain movies and you don't have to remember and appreciate movies for every little thing. My relationship with The Talented Mr. Ripley is, it's an interesting psychological drama, but it's also just the best looking movie I've ever seen. And isn't that something that you want out of every movie? Something that looks incredible with great movie stars that are charming, that is an entertaining, engaging movie that also has some ideas and is about something. To me, it's a prime example of a filmmaker getting better after they win Best Picture, and a very worthy movie to be made after the gold. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know if you've seen this movie, if you enjoy it, in the comments down below, and subscribe to the channel. Every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to be releasing a new video, jumping around. Sometimes it's the 90s, sometimes it's the 2010s. We'll go back earlier to the 50s and 60s as well to cover the full history of the Oscars. But the one common theme is there's always going to be an interesting movie with an interesting production history or interesting movie itself that is definitely worth watching and worth covering to see its modern day reputation based on how it was treated kind of after the movie was released. Lots of fun I've been having with this series, so I hope you stick around. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.